it's being able to have that actual sort of connection, at least with social media, that I think that people's tendrils are beginning to spread out, and then you're getting
Yes.
linkages again. But prior to that, no, I would say
Prior to,
that
you're right.
walking linked arms, that's hard to do, because even yourself, I mean, you're a little younger than I am still, but but
I'm 45 for the record.
yeah, and I'm and I'm 11 years older still, right?
Okay.
But we haven't crossed paths until this year.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, think about it.
Yeah.
Um, the other person that I would say, and it was on a very, very sort of superficial level. It wasn't a very, very deep connection. But in Toronto, an instructor named Al Green had a whole set of studios.
Oh yeah.
Which one? He had one at Davisville and Young. It was the most recent one that I remember, and that was a long time ago.
Okay.
And he was, black male again, right?
Yes.
Like, in that panoply way back then, he was like one, and I was the
Yeah.
other one,
One of one. Right. Exactly.
right? And that was,
Yeah.
really not knowing anybody else in
Mhm.
fitness who fit our description. So
Do you have any hypothesis as to why that is? Because that is a reflection of not just the fitness industry, but of pretty much every industry when it comes to Black people, and that's my commentary on the on the Caribbean community, like not being together. Like I've heard my parents say that same thing, that like, oh, the Black people can't come together. Like there's a sense of, look at the Chinese people, they all have this whole Chinatown, and then we have this. And there's a sense that we don't
well,
come together anywhere. Like
first of all, don't think the Chinese are united, because they're not. I mean, if you have the Cantonese and the
yes,
people who speak Cantonese versus the Mandarin population versus the Mandarins who then live in Taiwan,
hmm
it's not so unified, right? And there's
right,
good look at the situation in China right now. So
hmm
that's one thing. It's harder to get people together than you think. I think for Afro-Caribbeans, unlike maybe African Americans, um, each island is its own culture. So I'm
yes,
Trinidadian, right? And
right,
there might be, I hope I don't offend anybody, but there's a series of islands that are sort of in the orbit of Trinidad that have very similar cultures, because our histories are very much the same. So you look
yes,
at Grenada, you look at Saint Lucia and Saint
hmm
Vincent,
hmm
right? And then even getting into some of the French Caribbean, so Martinique
yes,
and Dominica, right?
right,
So our coming into our own cultures was very different than, let's say, Jamaican culture, or the
yes,
culture in Haiti, or the culture in Hispaniola, or anywhere in the north, right? St.
right,
Kitts.
right,
I mean, there's a lot of similarities, but there are a lot of differences. So
yes,
knitting that all together, and that's a point to be made, that you can't look at Black culture as a monolith ever. That's the biggest mistake I think that people who are not Black make. That everybody's Black, everybody's the same, and that's not true.
yes,
Not true
right.
by any stretch of the imagination. Uh, Now, I may have to be corrected on this, but in Africa alone, there are over at least 100 different people,
Yes.
right,
Yeah.
on that continent. We're all Black.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
the only thing that we have in common, is that we're all Black.
Yeah. That's where it stops.
That's it. But there are
Yeah.
100 different peoples on that continent alone. And in the West Indies, most of us are derived from Ghana, Nigeria,
hmm
Biafrans, so deeper into Nigeria, Mali, Cameroon, and those are all different people already. Okay, so
Yes. Right.
yes, going through all of that. So that's why it's tough. It's not so easy. I don't think it's easy to treat us as a monolith.
hmm
And again, anybody who tries to usually ends up failing,
Right.
because
Exactly.
we are so very, very different.
I think that's why, generally speaking, why that Malcolm X comment about it being a humanity problem really resonated with me, because you see what's happening in one corner of the United States and you say that that's a US problem.
Right,
That's a
right.
northern problem or a southern problem. And Malcolm X will say, no, this is a humanity problem.
Exactly. And this is the way we have to look at all of the things that are facing us in the current day as humanity issues, right? If it speaks to our humanity, and we look into our humanity, immediately we know things are wrong.
Yes.
And that should be the basis of our new approach to making sure that things are corrected and things are righted again.
Yes.
for sure. I know Malcolm X, as I think I mentioned last week, he's one of my heroes, even before
Before
Martin
his
Luther
kind of,
King,
yes.
right? Even before Martin Luther King, you had, he was a lot of things that he said have really come to light. And I mean, I
Yes.
know that he and King had come to, a few disagreements on the way to approach how
Hmm.
to deal with Black lives in the 60s in particular.
Right.
But
Do
yeah,
you
no,
think,
both of them were both right. Let me put it to you this way,
yes. Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
But again, there are differences even amongst themselves, and that just goes to show you that there isn't, to think of unanimity, right, is not, we're a collective of people, right? We are,
Yes.
right, we're not one people, we are a collective of so many different types of people, and we're not all the same, and we can't be all made to look the same or
Hmm.
dealt in the same way because it's very different throughout our population, and that's the way.
Right.
And again, looking at it as a humanity problem
Right.
first, right? But then,
Exactly.
particularly, people are just looking at us for the color of our skin and don't realize the vastness of our collective and the vastness and the variety of peoples that we have within the collection. You're just black. That's it.
Right.
So that, and then that feeds into the racism again. I think that going back to your original question, why is it so difficult? Um, Again, particularly as black men, and I'm starting in fitness since 1988. I was the only one. I was the only one that I could see.
Hmm.
Right? Where am I going to find somebody else? How? And without social network, without necessarily an internet as powerful as it is today. I mean, the internet was around then, but that was for my university emails, and that's it.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes. Yes.
It. How am I going to find somebody? I'm interested in my own survival. So how is that going to, right? How's
Yes.
that going to help me? If I'm going to divert energy away to finding other people at that time, and certainly trying to get up in business,
Hmm.
that was my primary focus, and I'm sure that was your primary focus when you first started,
Yes.
and anybody else's primary focus. How we're going to progress in our business.
Right. Interested in our own survival.
Hmm.
I think that that is the base. I mean, if you look at the root, I think that even today, that's part of the reason why we don't have that same, that
Cohesion.
collaboration happening, right?
Hmm.
The cohesion, that's what I was looking for, because there's an interest in our own survival. And then I think of that saying, that when the African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
Yes. Well, that makes absolute sense. Yeah, I should bring my little book of African proverbs downstairs because there are so many, and from all over the continent, and not just
Yes,
one place. But
right.
yes, I know that one very well. That's
Yeah,
right, and
exactly.
it's true. We have to go together in order to have success, and
Right.
that speaks to a um, very clear understanding of humanity as a social species. Right? We
Yes.
survived together. It was through our collective action that we are here today. It's not through any one individual's uh, action, right?
Yep.
But it's through our collective will that we do this and we get this far together. So yeah, we have to really start networking. The
Hmm.
internet is here. It's a great tool to use, so we should use it
Yes.
and
Absolutely.
start. And you doing what you do, exactly what it's done, and it's certainly broadened my connections now, observing other people who are black or of color and seeing what they're doing and getting an understanding more and a worldwide sort of view, not even just locally in the Toronto or GTA,
Yes.
but
Right.
across the country and into the States and into Europe. So what you do is fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you. No, I'm enjoying this, and I'm also watching how I behave with this too, because at the same time this is great and we make these connections, it's easy to become comfortable here, right?
Yeah,
Oh, Martin and I talk now, we're good. It's like, no, you can actually phone him. Like, you can actually drive to Toronto and visit him. We get comfortable with where we're at and we pat ourselves on the back for one level of connection. But for those of you in the chat section there, when was the last time you actually picked up the phone and called somebody? When was the last time that you actually took that relationship connection to another level of intentionality?
right. I think we're all guilty of complacency in that regard. Oh well, and that the internet is a double-edged sword that way, right?
Yes.
Because people think, oh, I've made the connection. Ah, well, that's good. I'm interacting with them on, but you're not really interacting. You're not interacting unless you have a personal in space. Now that's difficult to do given the pandemic
Right.
right now, right? But
Right.
still, there was no excuse before, and certainly when this is done, there's no excuse after. So
Right.
I think you hit the nail right on the head.
Because the step is really a phone call, right? Like, I mean, remember back in the day, it wasn't just a text. Like, I know that even like, if I want to reach out to someone, I text them before I phone them. Good for a call now? You good to go? Like, I mean, like like I grew up with my dad. We'll be on the street and he'd be like, "Oh, let's just pass by Russell's house." Like, you don't even call. You don't even call before you arrive,
That
right? Like,
that is so Caribbean. It isn't funny. Okay. This is the way Trinidad still operates. Well, not so much now. You see, that has disappeared now. But certainly
yeah,
when I was a kid, oh, we're going to go by so and so. Oh, and it's random. Like it
it's
wasn't planned or anything.
random,
We're just going to drop by this one, or we're going to drop by that one. And
right?
you hop into the car, or you take a walk, whatever, and you're at this place. For me, it's somebody that I may need, or it might even be family that I don't know very
Yes,
well because my family is very huge, and all of a sudden I'm being connected with this person who knew my mother so well or knew my father so well, and and
yes,
and and now is saying, well, I knew you, and they're saying to me, I knew you when you were like yay tall, and
yes.
so yeah, yeah, that's gone.
It's
It's or
gone.
is slipping away. It's I think we have to start rebuilding that. That's a good point.
Yeah,
I thought I was supposed to be the one providing all of this. You're doing a good job. Let me interview you instead. This is
yeah,
perfect.
yes. Yeah, no, that's it just sparks something. We started to talk about that. I think that we start talking about mentoring and intentional relationship building and locking arms. There are some tangible steps that are a lost form, and we can't use even this pandemic as an excuse to get on the phone with somebody, right?
No,
Like
certainly
there,
not.
there are certain things that can be done, and we sit back a little bit.
So, so for me in my development, I think that middle piece, the locking arms piece, is the piece that was missing. Certainly, it started with the good mentor,
Hmm.
and I in turn do mentoring as well too. And we had a program at Heart House that we're going to reinvigorate again this year or soon. May not be this year, might be in the next year again. About taking looking at people of color, uh, indigenous, black, and people of color, and teaching them the ropes about how to become fitness leaders and fitness instructors. So we had this program running
Yes,
for a few years, and it was moderately successful. It's hard. I think that in the U of T environment, it's hard because um, it's so competitive. People again are looking towards that end goal, and
yes,
to give the idea of healthy mind and healthy body, where things have to be um, merged, right? The idea of
yes,
the academic pursuit, but also the physical fitness and health. It's hard to convince people. Sometimes students, particularly when the stress loads are so high,
yes,
to
yes,
come into
yes.
that. But yeah, and I say that we've had some fitness leaders come out of that programming before. So I started doing that mentoring back in the '90s, and I've had a few people who've become successful in and of themselves. Some of color, some who were Europeans, but whatever,
Hmm.
still.
Great. Yeah. I'd love to unpack the term that we started to talk about last week,
Mm.
psychological safety.
Yes.
And just there's so many different contexts that we can use that in. I was talking with one of my colleagues this morning about it. How did that phrase come about, and what does that mean for you right now?
So I actually just recently learned the phrase, but when it was given to me, it was like all the lights turned on, all the bells went off, and then reflecting on my own life and saying, yeah, that makes absolute sense. So again, that idea of psychological safety is the ability to bring to the table what you have, who you are, regardless of color, regardless of race, regardless of background. You come to the table and you can feel safe being who you are and and speaking your thoughts. Sorry, and speaking your mind without and being who you are without ridicule. or
Okay.
the sense of ridicule, or feeling like you're an imposter at the table when really you have a place at the table. So that's that notion in the grand scheme of things. That's the notion of
Yes.
psychological safety.
Yes.
So as Black people, and if we're honing it into Black women and Black men, I think that in the fitness industry, there's areas that are psychologically safe, but they're only psychologically safe because of a stereotype, right? They're
Okay.
psychologically safe because Black men are supposed to excel at track and field. Black men are supposed to excel in basketball. Black men are supposed to excel in North American football, right?
Yes.
Those sort of things. So there's psychological safety there, and that's people are driven to. But there's a whole wide world of fitness delivery, like Pilates, for example.
Yes.
And quite frankly, I don't think Black men have been allowed to feel psychologically safe in the Pilates world, at least initially. I think that's going to start
Mm,
changing,
yes.
and
There's
it is changing. But still, for us to have this conversation 10 years ago, would you have thunk it? Probably not.
probably not.
Right?
Exactly. Right.
Even in a more conference sort of deal, and I've presented for local things as well too. But then again, I'd be the only Black person in the house, and I'm presenting to maybe a smattering of people of color, but mainly women,
Mhm.
right? Very few men in that, and yeah, it's that's the aspect of psychological safety. People, if they do not feel that they can bring themselves to the table, be real about who they are, and be real about their ideas, then they
Mhm.
tend to shut up, and then those voices then do not get heard. Psychological safety allows
Yes.
for a panoply of voices to be heard and to be considered, right, as opposed to maybe just one voice or
I
one.
have a word image of that. As you're saying that, I remember a friend of mine telling me, sharing this story. I thought it was a little bit funny, but this kind of ties into it. He was in high school. He was a high level football player, high level track athlete, but he loved chess. So as a black youth, pick
We got you back.
Caribbean. I'm back here. Sorry, what? Yes. So picture like black Canadian Caribbean heritage youth, in Brampton back in the day, and you want to be cool and you play all these sports, but he loved chess, so he would run around the school, go back in the back door, go play for the chess club, go back out the back door, run all the way back around the school to hang out with his black friends at the front of the school after school.
Oh, wow.
So there's a sense of like the psychological safety in that. Would you say, whereas it's like to be accepted in the black crowd, you can't do something that's outside of your context, and vice versa?
Yes, agreed. And this is one of the things I think that limited a lot of Black men from getting into broader fields, because then you develop this social construct whereby you live your own stereotype, and if anybody who's outside of that is considered to be an outsider or strange or weird, or
Yes.
even co-opting there's so many terms that we have for
Yes.
Black people who do white things,
Right.
right?
Yes. Well,
Okay,
can
so
you
there's even.
just do you use that definition? Can you explain the definition of co-opting, just for those who have heard it thrown around? But what do you mean by co-opting?
So co-opting is just, so for example, if you live and this is true for everybody, because if okay, the best example would be rap music.
Okay.
Rap music is a very um, urban,
Urban.
Black
Yes.
uh, thing. Okay, but if you look at the people who are on top of the business today and who are making tons of money, I would argue that Black people may make up a quarter of that,
Yes.
right? And
The
the rest
M&Ms of the world.
that's right. Okay, and then all of the other people are all up and making tons of money on it. That's a co-option. So they're taking something that's not theirs
Mhm.
and then making it theirs, and putting themselves forward as legitimate um, sort of prophets, if you will, of a movement. Okay, so that's like a very big and extreme form. But another way of looking at co-opting is that simply that, like your friend loved chess. There's no reason why he shouldn't play it. But his other friends would think, oh, he's sold out to some sort of white activity, which is what
Mm,
chess has become. Meanwhile, of course, it was actually invented on the African continent anyway,
there you go.
along with a few other games. But right, there's a stereotype that only Europeans of a certain ilk play chess. I
Yes.
play chess, by the way, and I haven't played in a year, but I had a friend of mine who's unfortunately moved out of the country that we used to play online even as
Mm,
often as we could, but time zones just don't allow it now.
yeah.
So yeah, but that's it. You've grown up. You appreciate something that's not part of your culture. You take it in, and then you're accused of taking that and using that maybe to make yourself better than everybody else too. That's another. That's
Ah,
another. There's
it's so
it is
vast.
such a complex. When you
Yeah.
say unpack this is going to be another like 4 or 5 conversations, probably a book and also a
Yeah.
PhD thesis. Okay,
Dissertation.
so
I
it's
can't remember. Yeah.
it's it's very very difficult to unpack. And again, my perspective is not the only one. There are going to be others who are black as well too, who will have variations of my perspective or disagree with what I'm saying,
Okay. Yeah.
right? And very
Right.
vehemently disagree and say that they'll have a lot of from their own lived experience to say why they disagree, and it's totally legitimate.
Yeah. Right.
So,
So, yeah. So when we say it's co-opted, how do we differentiate between something that's co-opted and someone who is being an ally?
well, you
So
see, I don't think that we should look at uh, you see, again, that is a difficult question, man.
well, you're a
That
smart guy, so I figured I'd throw it at
I, you're pushing my boundaries here to the limits of my intelligence here. Good grief. Uh, It's hard. If there is a mutual exchange of culture and ideas, it is no longer co-opting. If there's a mutual understanding of the basis, the history of where people are coming from, and that's shared and that's acknowledged and appreciated, and
shared, acknowledge,
acknowledged
and appreciate.
appreciated,
Those are the
then I
keys.
don't think
Yes.
that's co-opting. That's allyship, that is cooperation, that is building. However, if you take something and do it and say it's your own, but it's not yours, it doesn't belong to you, right? And acknowledge how you came about these skills, especially, then that becomes co-option. We have tons of examples of cultural appropriation
Hmm.
and cultural co-opting that go on, and usually it's for commercial gain.
Right.
That's the main thing. You see a lot of appropriation is done at the expense of the culture for whom you've appropriated, and there's commercial gain to be done. Meanwhile, those people who've been trying for years to get their ideas across, again because of the idea of psychological safety, can't. Right?
Hmm.
They're either too afraid to lift their voices and say something, or if they do, everybody ignores them. But then somebody else takes their stuff and does
Yes,
it,
sir.
and
Yes.
whose voice is readily heard, right?
Yes.
And they do it, and then they make all the money. Meanwhile, the people who started it are all lying in the dirt. So
Yes.
I think that's where you can begin to delineate. But this whole idea of cultural appropriation and is very different. It's causing problems. I mean, we've had
Yes.
recent problems. I mean, in terms of Europeans co-opting indigeneity and not recognizing it, for example, right?
Yes.
And of
Right.
course, between African diaspora and Europeans, the amount of co-opting that's gone on over centuries.
Centuries.
And again, not giving credit for our contribution.
Right.
You
Exactly.
look at American radio in the 50s, right?
Yeah.
The only way that black music could be heard by white people is if a white person did it. It was very rare for a black musician to be aired on a white radio station.
Yes. Yes.
But rock and roll, it's from us,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Jazz,
Yeah.
it's from us. It's all of these things, it's from us. But we were prevented from
Right.
from doing that sort of thing. So those are pretty high end examples of appropriation and co-opting culture.
Right. Exactly.
That's the best I can do, man. Sorry.
That's That was pretty good. No, that was brilliant. That absolutely is brilliant. And so when it comes down to psychological safety,
Yeah.
there is responsibility that people like you or I have to make certain arenas feel safe for people too. Would you not say?
Yeah, agreed. And I think we have to be, our responsibility is also to be present in as many arenas as possible so that people can
Okay.
see it and understand that there's a place for them
Yes.
here in what we do. So
Right.
absolutely, it's our responsibility.
That reminds me of the times that you hear or see a professional athlete say, "I am not a role model,"
But you
and
are a role model.
that's where I was going. But you are just by virtue of where you stand.
And not only that, the whole world sees you because you're on TV,
Yes. Right.
right? And there's that can also be the flip side of that psychological safety is that they don't feel what they have to offer. There's that imposter syndrome,
Is
all of those things.
yes.
They don't feel that what they have to offer can be role modeling,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
Or maybe that they also understand too that they are flawed as people and they're afraid of people seeing those flaws as well. We're all flawed. I mean,
We're
there's
all
not,
flawed. Yeah.
yeah, we're all flawed, and you have to take that. But if you're doing good, right, you have to continue to do good despite your flaws, and that's part of the whole growth mechanism is to overcome your flaws and continue to do good, right, and continue
Right.
to spread.
Well, even if you don't overcome your flaws, it's there's a notion of leading with a limp, right? Like
Yeah,
we have those flaws, we have those shortcomings, we have those scars, and we have to lead in spite of those. We even make those visible so people can identify with the fact that, hey, I have a scar too. I can speak in spite of my scars or in spite of my shortcomings, in spite of how who I think I am.
exactly, exactly. Again, that was a nice summary. Very good. No, no, that you said it. You said it, and that's the thing. We have to bear, bear ourselves forward, scars and all, and that's part of being a role model because no one arrives from heaven perfectly set in their
Yes.
position. Some people might. That's another story. But
Right.
but for the I posted on my feed a couple of days ago. Maybe it was a couple of days ago now. It was something that for those of you who have followed me or people who do follow me know that as often as possible, I quote Nelson Mandela, who's sort of the most recent example of leadership and by example. And one of the things that he said is that great things are achieved by just ordinary people. I'm
Yes.
paraphrasing, right?
Mhm.
But our greatness comes from our ordinary lives, our ordinary days, right? There's nothing spectacular or extraordinary, but just living out your life and, again, being ordinary, but letting people know that, hey, this is fine. This is what
Yes.
you need to do. Or this is my job. I'm here. You're good here too, right? So
Yes.
it's a very and very, very, very important quote of his. And I posted it up. I do encourage people to follow the Nelson Mandela page if you want some inspiration, particularly
Okay.
as a person.
Yeah.
I think it's important, and also just to see um, what they're doing with that. Anyway, and this is the Nelson Mandela Foundation.
Okay. Yeah, I'll
Okay.
look into that. And
Yeah.
and this ties into my talk from the weekend. Like all you're saying about ordinary people and being role models. When we look at the person you're looking up to as a mentor and the person that we're locking arms with, we often think that we're not worthy of the person helping somebody up.
Yeah.
Like we haven't arrived enough to be able to help somebody else yet.
Yeah, I think so, and I think that's comes partly from an acknowledgement of our own
Mhm.
shortcoming. But the fact that someone comes to you for help,
Mhm.
right? They recognize that you can help them. So,
Yes.
the fact that that's happened already should hopefully dispel some of that. But you're
Yeah.
right. We talked about imposter syndrome
Mhm.
last week as well.
Yes.
To you being in a place and you feel you don't necessarily belong, even though you do belong.
Mhm.
You do have a very rightful place in that environment. Absolutely. So
Yes.
that plays into it as well, too. But it, and I guess too, given Black history, particularly in North America, when we are successful or when we're doing things right, we can become even our own worst critics in terms of, well, we're not perfect enough. I mean, I don't know about your West Indian parents or your Caribbean parents, but my Caribbean parents, and I mentioned this last week too, you have to be twice as good as anybody else to be recognized. You
Yes.
have to be this, you have to be that. All of that pressure, right? And you feel that you may not be living up to your parents' expectations, even though you're doing wonderful work, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
this is, I think all of those things play into that. And it's
Mhm.
something that we have to acknowledge. Yes, it exists, but yes, we have to fight through that. Again, if people are coming to us for help, it's because they feel that we're qualified to help them. End of.
Yes. Mhm. Exactly, exactly. And you had a beautiful line. You were saying, like, with your father being a doctor last week, you were saying that you want to, like, your job is to keep them out of his office.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
I love that because, like, there's a sense of understanding who you are, what your capability is, and what your role is.
But that took time to be able to come to my dad and tell him that.
Yes.
Okay. That took a lot of hard knocks, going through the industry, getting certified, doing all these various certifications. Again, we talk about the letters behind our name. Sometimes we can make our own alphabet, right?
Right.
But
Yeah.
but having to do all of those things and then being then confident in the skin, sorry, understanding your skills and then saying, yeah, Dad, I'm here to keep people out of your office. Right. And if
Yes.
they have come to your office, then my job is also to keep them away. Now, my doctor, who's a very good source of clients for me, right,
Mhm.
also
Yes.
believes in that too, right? So that's one of the
Yes.
reasons why, I get some, it's a source of business for me as well too, because he understands that. But my dad's generation, my doctor's only a couple of years older than I am, so we're in the same generation. But um, yeah, my dad's generation, that was a bit of a revelation. And he accepted that. Once I was able to
Yes.
come to him and say with confidence, I'm here to keep people out of your office, to keep them well. Okay.
Mhm.
So he understood that and he appreciated that. But that was, that's getting on for him in his life. And certainly I was well into my late 30s and early 40s when I was able to have that conversation with him.
Right. Exactly. That's a very discussion about understanding who we are.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
And again, if we want to bring it back into Pilates, I think that
Mhm.
um, black women and black men have to have a very strong sense of who they are in order to survive. Okay, look look
Absolutely.
at look at our clientele. I think I mentioned this last week. Mainly white, mainly female.
Yep.
Okay, and if you look at our colleagues, mainly white, mainly female. So again, we become minorities. We run the risk of being tokenized, which is
Yes.
which is a problem. I think it's a big problem. And again, all of those that because of that, we're not surrounded by other people who are like us. If we bring it back to psychological safety, we
Hmm.
have to kind of create our own
Yes.
psychological safety,
Personal
and that's
safety.
harder to
Yeah.
do when that infrastructure is not around you, right?
Right.
You have to
Exactly.
build, you have to build that yourself. And I mean, if
Yeah.
you look
Yeah.
at our business choices, we're both independent businessmen, right? Business
Hmm.
people,
Hmm.
right? You have a studio, I have a consultancy. Okay, so and we do it very much unsupported.
Right.
Okay, but at least we have the confidence to do that. Not everybody has the confidence to do that. A lot of people need that surrounding infrastructure in order to help them build that confidence. And so
Yes.
that's where you and I come in terms of the mentorship part, and
Right.
even locking arms with our contemporaries part too. This
Yes.
is where we're important, I think. So it's all very
It's
much
all
a
exactly.
big ball of wool, right? And it's all
Yes.
entwined. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, when you mentioned the word tokenism, that's the sense of knowing who I am. I feel like I like to leverage that notion of tokenism and say, okay, well, if you're thinking this is tokenism, I'm actually going to take advantage of that to use that to get into certain rooms, arenas, places, and
yes,
and speak my truth and to do whatever it is. Like if you're looking at it from that perspective, let me take advantage of that for the greater good or for my own
and that's
personal
exactly
gain.
what that's exactly what I've done,
Yes.
right? And exactly what you're doing, exactly. But then you need the confidence to be able to do that
Right.
and feel that you have a place where you are and feel that. you're of value and what you have a lot to bring to the table. If the psychological safety is not there, that could be a big inhibition for a lot of people to kind of ask for what they want, ask for the right pay, ask for their voice at the table, ask for all of those things. Because again, without psychological safety, again, you come into imposter syndrome,
Yes.
feeling inadequate, um, all of those things that kind of can hold you back, even though you have the skills and
Right.
the property to do that. And it isn't to say that other people aren't culpable. Obviously, there is that, but it's the way that if you want to break through a degree of systemic racism, that's what you have to do. Because if the
Yes.
system if the system is holding you back, right, then you have to make your own path. Don't use
Yes.
the system, circumvent it.
Circumvent it.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
or use it against itself in order to bring yourself to the next level.
Man, you sound like a superhero. Like just like
Hardly, hardly. I was
that's
thinking about something that you had said earlier in this week. It's just drawing it back to Pilates. It was your interview with, he was also going to speak at Brink. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance this weekend to look at Brink, but he was one of
uh
your speakers last week.
Benjamin. Is that
Benjamin, yeah.
yes.
Okay.
There
And yes, and he talked about because he's the curator for Pilates 360, and
that's
he
right.
talked about well, we can't be uh, disciples of this method and that method, or I adhere to this. I'm a classicalist. I'm a modernist, right?
Yes.
You know, I'm a fusion person, whatever. We have to take everybody's skills into account. So, as Black people experiencing Pilates, right, with our bodies and the variety of the bodies that we have, right, those are
Yes.
now considerations that maybe in an all-white European environment that need to be taken into account as well. I mean, even
Yes.
even Joseph amongst his disciples, if you will. I always look, the best example of this would be Eve Gentry. Do you know?
Yes. Yep.
Yes. Okay. So Eve Gentry's story, for people who are not aware, she had to have a double mastectomy at one point in her career. She was a ballet dancer, and that's generally career ending because that surgery back when she had it was particularly brutal. Okay. And
Yes.
so she goes to Joe, as the story goes, and there might be apocrypha attached to that because you're also dealing with Joseph sometimes. There's the biblical truth, and then there's the apocryphal tales, right? He's almost like a Bible unto himself.
Right.
But as the story goes, I mean, Joseph had to adopt and adapt a lot of movement in order to get Eve back into form. And then Eve, now as a teacher of Pilates, puts that forward. I would argue that 90% of the rehabilitative Pilates that we do, not just the method or any variations of method, but the rehabilitative stuff that we do comes from a lot of her work. And Joseph,
Yes.
and really Joseph, even amongst his own people, knew to adapt the exercise to different bodies. Why the Fletcher method looks different from the Romana method, right? Romana
Yes.
was a
Yes.
very skilled ballet dancer. I'm sure in her time you can five ways from sideways. He was able to do a lot of things right off the bat, whereas
Yes.
whereas other people may not have been so mobile, right?
Hmm.
And see that. And so you get these different flavors because people were different. They learned
Yes.
differently. And
Right.
as Black people, we also have different bodies and different flavors, different cultures that we're bringing into the modality as well too.
Mhm.
And I think it's our duty then to teach as we have learned and gotten that
Yes.
self-awareness of what our bodies are like. And even you and I we have two very different types of bodies as well too, and we're
Right.
both
Right.
doing the same thing, but we do things according to what our body needs and wants,
Yes.
right?
Right. Right.
And perform. So
Yeah.
that makes a big difference. And I think bringing it back into the Black conversation, we have to acknowledge Black bodies. We have to acknowledge the difference in our bodies, not only compared to Europeans, but also in and amongst ourselves too. Wide
Yes.
variety of types and styles, and we have to adapt, and we have to make Pilates accessible to all those bodies, all bodies, and it becomes again a human problem, right? There's
Yes.
such a variety of body types and shapes and sizes in the human race, if you will. Okay, and
Yes.
we have to
Yes.
be able to adapt the method to suit everyone, so that everybody can benefit from the method. And that's one of our biggest goals, I think, as people
Yes.
who are mentors and instructors. All of that is that we have to be able to adapt the method to meet the needs of our populations.
Absolutely. And I love hearing you say that, Martin, because what it does, it gives people permission to move from the way they were taught to understand between their own understanding of the work and the body that's in front of them to adapt it to that body
Exactly, exactly.
instead of
One
trying to
reason,
just superimpose that which we the way we've taught it and just trying to impose it upon a person. Now we can look at it in different ways. So it's good.
and I think so. I don't know how many people do. I mean, that was the one of the fortitudes of working with stock Pilates and getting certifications through them is that that strong physiological focus. I think the issue with them perhaps is that they were only seeing one sort of body, right?
Yes,
And,
right.
or a range of bodies in a certain type,
In the same, yes,
right, in the
same
same group.
spectrum.
Whereas for me, I put somebody on the reformer, for example. And the reformer, because I remember you talking also with a chiropractor and physiotherapist
Yes,
several weeks.
Oliver. Yes,
But for me, when I put them on the reformer and I put their feet up on the foot bar and just have them extend their legs, right, and do that first footwork, it is like an X-ray machine. It tells
yes,
me everything about that individual. And after that first session, after the postural assessment, after then that first session on the reformer, I begin to adapt things to
yes,
suit them to relieve them of pain if they have pain and make them feel better, make them feel more in touch with themselves, etc. So every
yes,
session for me as an instructor becomes a learning session for that client. Sometimes you have to take extensive notes on that
yes,
client as well too to make sure that you're getting it right. When
yes.
again, I think I mentioned that I have a very large seniors practice again, and that's another set of people who are neglected, right?
Right.
Physically
Yes.
neglected. Well, you're past it now, right? But
Right.
people are living longer. I mean, my mother retired at 55,
Mhm.
and she lived an additional 33 years after that. Thankfully, it
Right.
was an intervention, so they're
Yes.
doing okay, right? But you have
Yes.
people who are retiring at 65, and their life expectancy is at least 25 years, 30 years after that. And if you
Right.
want them to not be drawing from the hospitals and stuff, keeping people out of the hospitals, they need to be taken care of. So,
Yes.
we have to adapt it to age groups. We have to
Mhm.
adapt it to body types. We have to even adapt it to cultures because some cultures are uncomfortable with certain aspects of movement. So you have to adapt that, and you have to make sure that you are also respecting those things as well too, and then giving them
Yes.
the best bang for their buck, so that they are also achieving and moving.
Right.
So I think as people of color, black men in particular, who are teaching Pilates, that is one of our. It's almost like our divine sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Vocation, right? Our divine
Yes.
vocation to impart that understanding that A, we're different, and B, everybody's different who comes onto the table. And C, if we want to be accessible to people of color, then we have to acknowledge their difference
Yes.
as well and adapt the method to suit them.
Yes. That is so inspiring for me.
Oh,
And
Lord.
like, well, I mean, because like it's sometimes you someone issues a challenge and you shy back. It's like I can't do it, and then you hear something like that. It's like that is so vast and such a massive responsibility. I use that superhero analogy, like with great knowledge there's great responsibility. Now I'm looking at it like black people are so broad and diverse, and then we have old people and we have all these different cultures, all these different things. There's so many different dynamics of people who are coming into our space that we have to take into consideration while remembering exercise. Like, you know what I mean?
Well,
Like
yeah. So
while remember, so
our
it's
job is not to design perfect Pilates bodies. Okay. There's a few people in the population that kind of fit that,
mhm.
right? But not everybody. Our job is to make people uh, feel the best and do the best that they can do with the bodies that they have.
Yes,
All right. That's what
Yes.
wellness is all about too, really. It's about that. It's not about a certain sort of codex of physical activity and fitness. Oh, you need to get 10,000 steps. Oh, you need to do this. You need to do that. Of
Yes.
course, they're all good, right?
They're
But
good.
taken
Yeah.
out of context and then just laid on a culture and a society or a group of people that for whom, movement is very important, but they don't move that way. You have to move the way they move, right?
Yes.
They don't appreciate, or appreciate's the wrong word, but they don't get the same value out of those things. But in their cultural context, it's actually the same thing, but it's the flip
It
side
looks
of a
differently.
coin, but it's
Yes.
looked at differently. Exactly,
Yes.
right. So that's really so very important, and I think that's one of the big roles that we have as
Mhm.
black male instructors. The second role, I think, is to get more black men into doing this.
Yes.
Okay, there is a big sucking noise when we talk about black men in Pilates. It's like, you know,
Yes.
here's you and I.
Yes.
Give me some other black men that you can list that are doing this. I mean, how big is that list? For
That
me,
I can name that list on one hand, I
Jean-Claude
think.
Nelson in Germany,
Yep.
who's a brilliant, brilliant
Yep.
person.
Yep.
Um, there's a couple in the States that I can think of,
Yep.
right?
Totally.
Some on Pilates Anytime that I've seen, but
Right.
really, where is everybody? They're not here, right?
Right.
So we really have to kind of draw it and say, yes, you can do this. Yes, you can be successful at this.
Yes.
Yes, this is important for the survival of our culture just as much as anything
Absolutely.
else that we do.
I will. I think it starts with conversations like this. Like I will put this conversation out there as much as I can. I know people that aren't on this list, but yeah, Robert Turner. I found him on LinkedIn actually.
Hmm.
Yeah. So there are people like Derek Friday here in Toronto, right? Like there are
Yes,
some gentlemen out there. So, but this is it. Like these conversations need to be had more. These conversations need to be out there more. We need to leverage these dialogues so people can see just the magnitude of the task in front of us.
mm.
And that is 57 minutes, my friend.
We'll do part three maybe in a couple of months.
I appreciate your time. Honestly, I learned so much in these conversations, Martin. Like I can't tell you how rich this is for me.
Oh, well, it's also, listen, it goes both ways,
Yeah,
right? And you have to be thanked for facilitating what we do.
thank you. Appreciate it. All right. I'm gonna
All
sign
right.
you off here. Thank you so
All
much
right.
again.
Until the next time.
All right, yes.
All right. Take care.